Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and that makes this the first ever 21st episode of Cloud Control. Welcome back, Kate. Hello.
Hey, it's nice to be back. I I don't know. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm struggling. I just finished Before Your Eyes, which we're gonna talk about shortly, and I have not fully recovered from this experience.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty
please
funny.
bear with me today.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because we were actually going to record this podcast last night when we were together.
Mhm.
And as you might notice if you're watching the video version, we are not together today. And it's because Kate hadn't quite been able to finish the game. And I was like, no, you know what? Before we talk about this one, I think it's worth getting to the end. And so here we are today, a few hours later, making it a backup podcast time, but it's going to be for a better conversation, I think.
Yeah, and I feel both thankful to you that you had me finish the game and tricked into having such a devastating morning.
All right, well, let's talk about Before Your Eyes. But just before we do that, I want to give everyone a lay of the land for the show today because we are doing something just slightly different than our usual layout. Because we're going to be watching the state of play about Final Fantasy XVI live on the episode to end the show today, which means we're changing the order of a few things. We're going to talk about Before Your Eyes. I've got another game I want to talk about after that. Then we'll talk about our listener mail question for the day, and then we'll watch the trailer together. So if that's something you want to do, you can stick around to the end, and we can experience Final Fantasy XVI in all its glory together, everybody. Doesn't that sound nice? But before we get there, of course, it's time to talk about Before Your Eyes. And this is a very interesting game because it is we played it through the Netflix mobile app, something I never thought I would use to play a video game, but here we are. And I was just scrolling through there, just looking what they had. And Before Your Eyes caught my eye, because I thought I'd heard of it before. And it turns out this game is a very, I guess it's like a niche thing. It was on Steam before, but it's got a very interesting mechanic. And maybe, Kate, if you want to let everyone know kind of what this game is, because it's just so unique.
Yeah, so throw away your Joy-Cons and your $85 controllers. Because Before Your Eyes, as alluded to in the title, you come built in with the controller, and this game progresses through blinking as the main mechanic. There is some moving your phone to look around with some scrolling type movements, or using a little bit of the touchpad function on the phone, which I guess would probably be a mouse on computer, but the vast majority of the game is controlled through blinking, which seems bizarre. But it becomes such an integral mechanic to the game, and I guess it's up to everyone who's played it to decide if it is novelty or if it is mechanic that really enhances the experience. And that is, I think, kind of one of the core things that maybe we'll have to touch on with the game, but that is at least the selling point that stands out as being what's very unique about Before Your Eyes.
Yeah, it's leveraging eye tracking technology is what it's doing, and I think one of the things about the game that you and I both had was a couple, just I guess off the bat, varying levels of success with the eye tracking. Something that happens in the game, I guess you're sort of viewing these scenes of someone's life through their eyes, and there's different points where if you blink, it'll be like, oh, that memory's over, and you start the next one. But sometimes I had a few where it's like I didn't blink, but it didn't track it right, and so I had a few issues with that. But I think overall it actually worked pretty well for me. The blinking, you had a similar experience, right, with how it worked?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because the game is not on a timer. It is kind of a story you're playing through, and the blinking is used kind of as if you'd click on something a lot of the time. But then there are moments, and the game does warn you about this with a little metronome symbol that pops up, that you are aware then the next time you blink, you are going to exit the scene you're currently in, and you are going to progress to the next scene that the game has to offer. So it becomes almost this kind of tension of you're trying really hard not to blink because you don't want to exit the scene. You want to see what it fully has to offer. But at the same time, the more you try not to blink, the more your eyes really like need to. So like it's almost like a push and pull of like, okay, you didn't blink in this scene, but now you like next scene you might end up
Hmm.
having to progress it quicker because now your eyes are like desperate for that next blink. um so and it's not that extreme. Like you do have time in between where you can blink normally. Like you don't have to be like straining the entire time. But it puts an interesting kind of um it makes the scenes very fleeting, because they
Hmm.
are not permanent. Like they're going to progress no matter what because you don't have the ability to keep your eyes open forever. So when I first started playing the game, I found it a little bit frustrating a couple times where a scene would progress, but I know I didn't blink. It just tracked my eyes. Maybe I looked down a little bit and that registered as a blink. Um, so at first, starting the first half of the game, I found that to be a little bit frustrating. But by the second half of the game, I almost kind of liked that it didn't work properly because it tied in so perfectly with the like thesis of the game, in that moments are finite and that like you cannot like the game is like unfolding before your eyes and you are forced to continue moving on in time and space. And so when those moments were ripped away from me, it kind of there was a turning point in the game where I, instead of being frustrated by that, I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point. And so I didn't mind. I think it would definitely be problematic if it didn't work to the extent where it worked like 90% of the time, which is what I experienced. But I wouldn't say like stress too much about it if it doesn't perfectly track as you're
Hmm.
playing.
Yeah, that's my experience too. And like you said, I guess we can get a bit into the structure of the game and how it works. And I think I've alluded to before, you're sort of reliving this person's memories of their life. And I think we're going to spoil a lot of this game in this conversation because it's sort of hard to talk about it without spoiling it. But I guess we'll do our best. But as you're living through the scenes of this person's life, it is. I had the same experience of you where originally I was trying to like see everything. I was like holding my eyes open, like trying to make sure I stayed in the scene as long as possible. But I kind of relaxed on that after a while because I was like, there is something really grounding about missing out on what happens at the end of each scene, even if you miss out on what someone's saying or you don't get to read every little picture in the room or something like that. You can look around. But so the game itself is, aside from the blinking, it's quite a simple game though. Like you're just kind of going through scene by scene. You're usually making a simple choice. Like sometimes you have to describe something with an adjective or whatnot. But it's a pretty linear experience, and it kind of starts off and you're in this. You're told to zoom in right at the start, and then you appear in this boat, and it's almost like a River Styx situation where you're recounting your life. You seem to have died to this ferryman who's going to like relay your story and get you through the gate at the end of the game. And that's why he's trying to learn about your life. And it's just, I think it's a really great frame. And I think that narrator himself he's such a, like a welcoming character. I really enjoyed the way
Hmm.
he spoke and like his voice. And it's a pretty dire situation I think you're in. Like there's a air of like, there's like a grim mystery going on, but for some reason he's like very compelling off the start, and it makes you want to sit through and see what happens. And then I guess it just kind of, before long, you get really drawn into the game, or at least I did, and then you kind of, I don't know, it really escalates, I think, as it goes.
Yeah, the story to me, like obviously the mechanic is really interesting, and I think especially in the second half they utilize it really well. But I think even without the mechanic, it is just a really compared or compelling like visual story. Like because this game could very easily be a like Edith Finch style like
Mm-hmm.
game, or like a Florence or one of
Yeah.
those where you're more or less just sort of watching a story unfold and you have a little bit of interaction with it, but for the most part you are just more of an audience member. So I think even taking away the mechanic, which I think adds a lot and made this game like enhance the story, I found just the story itself to be very compelling. The characters are interesting, the way it's laid out before you, the way that it kind of like twists partway through, I would say,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is kind of where I'd perfectly stopped before that like
yeah,
twisty moment the first time I played, and I sat down within like 10 minutes of playing the second time. I was like, oh shit, like
yeah.
okay, this is a different game than I thought it was at the
Yeah,
beginning.
it's very different. It has like a morbid twist, right? Like you get to learn a bit about like the, I
Mhm.
guess like what causes this character to die and like get into this situation. And there's a lot of like,
Mhm.
there's like some family dynamics that happen, and you get to see the relationship with a few different people. And it's definitely like something where on face value you wouldn't expect to be like emotionally impacted by it, but like this game is a
Mhm.
heavy hitter. And I think, like you said, Florence is such a great comparable to, like, I don't think I've played, it's the same thing, and like I would describe this as like a very indie art, like
Yeah.
narrative focused, minimal mechanics, but they're like intentional in the way that they design it, especially at the end. Like the way that the game ends and how it makes you interact in the last time, I think is just so it's like a way, like we say, like games can tell a story in that way. You couldn't have that experience of this game not in a game setting.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the eye mechanic, well, it was funny when we talked last night. I was like, I think the eye thing is kind of interesting, but I feel like it's a little underutilized because I think it could be doing more to make you like complicit as an active participant. Like the blinking is interesting, but like if the scenes just faded, like it wouldn't feel too different. But as I played more, I really regret saying that to you
Yeah.
because I do think they kind of integrate a few different different ways of how the blinks work. But even just looking back on it and the way that you are changing how the pacing works based on your blinking, and you become like complicit in the story. Like you don't feel as much like you're watching a story unfold, even though that's totally what it is. Like there are a few decisions you can make, but they're very surface level. They don't really impact the story. Like there aren't going to be multiple endings because you know, change the person's life. Like you are on rails watching the story unfold about this person reliving moments from their life. But the way that you control it with the blinking and the way that you only see as much as you get to see in various scenes, and it creates that kind of like everyone's going to have a slightly different experience with the game, and the way that it ends where you really do feel like you've got like more of an agency as a player, but it's also like it's so weird to describe it because like obviously like you're a player, that's the whole point of games is that you've got the agency, but the fact that it
Hmm.
is agency that you can't fully control, like you almost feel like I almost feel like I've ripped that scene away from the character because I blinked and I shouldn't have, or like
Yeah, yeah.
you know. And I'll be honest, like I cried at the end of this game. I
I was close to it
I
too.
had a
I was
moment.
close.
I was so incredibly invested in it, and it felt so emotional at the end. And I honestly don't think I think the story would have impacted me regardless. But that extra mechanic, I think, is what tipped me over the edge of being so that extra level of like invested and
Hmm.
kind of almost feeling like responsible for part of the story.
Oh, that's
Like,
interesting. It's interesting you
oh,
took it that way, because I know what you're saying, because you're in control of every game that you play, but you're
mm-hmm,
doing it through buttons. Whereas in this game, you're doing it through like
mm-hmm,
your physical being and the way you're playing it. But to me, what was emotional about it was that it made me like, the story is very emotional. Don't get me wrong. Like I
yeah,
was pretty close to tears like at the end too, like just thinking about it. But then
mm-hmm,
afterwards, kind of the retrospect of like, what is this game saying about the way that we live? You know, like it's saying time is fleeting,
mm-hmm,
and like you said, you can't remember everything, and like you blink and it's gone unless you're very
mm-hmm,
intentional. Like the times in the game when I was very intentional keeping my eyes open because I really wanted to see how, like there's a scene, there's a girl that you meet early on, and you you know, you potentially might have a love interest, or she's a good friend or whatever it is, and you're very lonely,
mm-hmm,
and she's the connection you have in school, and she invites you to go to this beach at night so you can choose to sneak out or not, and I did. And you go
mm-hmm,
lay on the beach and she's just talking to you, and that scene, for whatever reason, for me was just like, I really want to see all of this scene, and I was so intentional about keeping my eyes open. But then there's other ones,
mm-hmm.
like you said before too, where it's like it's gone and I couldn't even tell you what happened in it because I just saw half a sentence. um, so it is very unique, but then it makes you think like, well, in your own life, you know, what have I paid attention to versus like what has gone by like that, and like what details have you missed? And it's just so like meta that I think
Mm-hmm.
it's that's what's interesting about this game. Is I think that if whoever plays it, you could have a very interesting conversation with them about like the meaning behind it, not just the narrative as well,
Mm-hmm.
like what it's trying to say. I think this game is fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I think it has exactly that kind of message. It's going to be unique to everybody. Like when you play, you're going to have a different takeaway or like a little bit of a different experience with it. And I think that, like, yeah, that extra layer of physicality and the way that it is grounded in your own like body as you're playing it just enhances that moment you have afterwards where you really like sit and think about it, and you think like, well, what are the things I'm going to remember at the end, like at the end, like it's morbid, but it's also really like kind of beautiful in a way. Like it is a sad game about like the death of somebody and them reliving their lives and what gave their life meaning and what were the relationships they had and what do they wish they had done differently and what are they happy that they did. And those are just so like fundamental human experiences that everybody's gonna
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately have to do, but at the same time like it adds a lot of beauty to it. Like some of the things you remember are like, like just on a day at home, and like my cat was sitting with me, and like they seem like they're not always these big life changing moments. Sometimes they're the mundane things, but
Mm-hmm.
that added just like that extra flash of like beauty and comfort into our lives. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very interesting what scenes are shown, because some of them feel, yeah, they're a lot of them feel very different or have different varying like weights to them. And I almost think it's interesting, like if there was a version of the game that has scenes you don't get to see, like because you see everything, it's just to what length you see the scene in, right? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
see
yeah.
either like 40% of it or 100% of it or whatever. It's depending how long you stay in that scene before you blink. But I think it's interesting, kind of like the extrapolation of this concept. It's like, what are all the other things that we didn't get to see because we just weren't
Mm-hmm.
present for them.
Yeah, and that kind of shapes like the context of the game, right? Like to me,
Mm-hmm.
I had the impression that my character had a first crush with the girl on the beach, but I could totally see a version of this game where you played and like you miss certain interactions where that wasn't the case, and that's your
Mm-hmm.
interpretation, right? I had an interesting thought about this game, and I've been debating it back and forth. Like, do you think this game is stronger because you play as a specific character, or do you think it would have been better as like a nameless character like you were the character, like I
So
kind of
this,
initially thought that it would be better as me, but now I'm kind of on the train of like I like the watching this specific Benny character that we have.
yeah, so this is kind of interesting. I think you could make a game that, I agree. I think I prefer that it's Benny and looking through Benny's life, but I think you could use this mechanic to make a game that is a bit more ambiguous. Like one of the things I was almost kind of felt a little bit let down when I saw this game, because when I saw the trailers, I thought it was going to be a little bit less of a cohesive story we were watching, and I thought it was just going to be more about like bouncing around between scenes. And maybe
Mm.
that was just like an incorrect impression I had gotten from whatever trailer I'd watched, and I thought it was really going to be more like kind of incoherent, like you'd bounce around, like here's a memory from when you were 20, here's a memory from when you were 35, and now we're 7 again. And I thought it was going to be a lot more like haphazard and kind of like inconsistent, and then you'd have to sort of piece things together at the end based on like what you saw, but it would be in more of a obscure format. And when this game turned out, was very obvious early on that it was going to be like more linear. I was a little bit disappointed because I thought like, oh, I kind of had that expectation and I wanted it to be the game
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be. And then I ended up being really happy that the game was exactly what it is, because once I got over that disappointment, I realized that the game was, really fantastic and I love everything about it. So I agree. I think for this game, being Benny was great, but I could see this format working. Like, I don't want to use my eyes as a controller for many games, but I could see it working in something a little bit more abstract as well, and in that kind of
Yeah,
context. But
yeah.
I
I
mean that.
think just the story couldn't be so specific then. Like the way that they're telling it
Mm-hmm.
about Benny himself, he can have a specific
Yeah,
relationship with his mom, and it makes
exactly.
sense For
exactly. It would have to be a different, story or setting being told. But yeah,
Hmm.
for what it was, I think that I like poor Benny a lot.
Me too. I feel bad for him in some ways, but yeah. I mean, anything else you wanted to mention on Before Your Eyes?
No, I think we did an okay job of not spoiling too much. I just think
I
people
think
should
so.
play it.
I think so.
It took about an hour and 20 minutes to beat it. I did it in 2 sittings. And I would say like just for sake of variety and for sake of trying something novel and unique that actually is also like I would say of a very high quality. Um I would totally recommend it. And especially playing it on my phone was cool. Like I don't ever
Yeah,
play games on
yeah,
my
yeah.
phone, but this actually was a really good phone game to utilize because you've obviously got the camera already set up. Like it's super simple to just sit there with your phone for an hour and yeah, I could not recommend this game more. Like I'm gonna probably be like consumed by it for the next few days, just like thinking back on all the like what ifs and how things could have been different.
100%. Yeah, this is one for sure you can recommend to people that have a Netflix subscription that don't play a lot of games, and just be
Mhm.
like, hey, check this out on your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this game to me should have like Journey status. Like when
Hmm.
Journey was
Yeah,
really
yeah,
popular, everyone's like, you gotta play Journey, like you've never played a game like this. Like I would say like this is kind of
yeah. It's so
on
short.
par
Like
with that sort of
it's so
experience.
short that you really don't have a reason not to try it. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so play that. Anyway, let me change topics here. Now, Kate, I have a surprise for you today because originally I was going to talk about Eastward on the show today.
Mhm.
And to your knowledge, that is what I'm going to talk about, but it's not because I haven't beaten Eastward and I'm getting close to the end. And I'm just like, if I delay it one more week, I can just talk about the game in its full breadth. And that just makes so much
Right.
more sense. So, what I'm going to talk about today is another game I may or may not have found on the Netflix game store as I was looking around. So, I found this thread, and the way that I found Before Your Eyes was because someone pointed it out on this thread online of like actual good games to play on like the Netflix service. And so
Mhm.
played Before Your Eyes, and the other one that they had really recommended was a game called, and I promise you this is a real name, Poinpy. Poinpy.
Okay.
Spelled
Sure.
Poinpy. I encourage you to look it up if you want.
Okay.
But Poinpy is the reason I was interested enough to try this game is because it's published by Devolver Digital. Everybody, our favorite Devolver.
Mhm.
So it can't be that bad, right? And it turns out this game is a lot more than it appears on face value, and I would liken it almost to a game like Downwell. Do you know Downwell?
I don't know. Maybe
Okay.
that's two games I've got to check out.
So for those that don't know Downwell, it's like a game where you play as a stickman, also published by Devolver, and basically you jump down a well and you can steer him left or right, and you have to like avoid enemies or jump on them, or you get different guns that you can shoot kind of downward as you're dropping.
Mhm.
And there's a few other mechanics, but that's basically the gist of it. And you see how far you can make it down the well as you go further further depths. The areas kind of change,
Mhm.
different enemies, different things go on. Pretty simple, but pretty cool. And this game is like the opposite. You're going up, and you're kind of this this little guy, and
Sorry,
you're
I just
jumping up
found a screenshot
and
of
collecting fruits. I was hoping you would.
Mhm.
So it looks ridiculous, and it's like a silly little game, but it's actually a lot of fun. You're kind of jumping up, and it's got like a slingshot kind of thing. If you think you'd like click on your phone, you pull back your thumb, and then he would launch in the opposite direction, like
Mhm.
a pool cue. If you've ever played like pool on
Like
your phone,
Ekans Hoop Toss in
like
Pokemon
yes,
Stadium 1.
just like that, just like that. And so
Mhm.
you're basically climbing up this tube, and there's different like platforms on it, and some enemies, they're all holding different fruit. There's like fruit flying around, and there's this big circular happy blue Snorlax looking monster, and he's like climbing up after you from behind. And the point of the game is that you have to like satiate his hunger by collecting the right fruits, and you have like 3 jumps at a time, and you have to collect all the fruit you need within like enough jumps before you touch the ground, in which case you like feed him, and basically you have to
Does
just
he
make it as
eat his
far up as you
own
can.
body if he
Yeah,
catches you?
he'll eat you otherwise. That's what he
Okay,
does.
sure,
So you're
sure.
basically just trying to make it as far up as you can and collect more and more complex and like larger orders of fruit every time. And eventually,
Mhm.
like the first level is a jungle, and you'll make it up, and the next one's like an underwater thing. And so it gets a little harder with enemies and whatnot. But then as the game goes, you also are like leveling up. I'm guessing the character's name is Poinpy, And so you like get more jumps consecutively before you have to touch the ground and regenerate them. You can do things like freeze time as you're trying to aim, because usually like just slow mos, but you can't like actually take forever to aim your shot. You can get all these different upgrades. And then there's also what you unlock later on once you have enough jumps to make it over to this other section on the menu. There's like a whole puzzle mode, and there's all like complete this drink, but you only get to jump 3 times, and you can like bounce off the walls and do all these different puzzles, and there's just so much to it. And I've just loved Poinpy as a time killing game for the past like 2 or 3 days. What a lovely, colorful little treat.
Super cute. Okay, so I've got a few thoughts on it. I've got a screenshot pulled up. I've got 3 thoughts. My first thought, actually, I got 4. My first thought is that the little guy you play as Poinpy, he reminds me of like the guys you play in like those like Bubble Bobble games.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Or whatever, like the ones where you have those like little dinosaurs and you shoot the stuff above you. The guy at the bottom that you're trying to feed looks like a first draft from like a Miyazaki movie. Like right. This was like Totoro on his first go through, and then he was like, redesigned 7 times.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, also, I don't know if the Poinpy is the thing you're trying to feed, or if the little green guy that you play as is Poinpy. I don't know.
That's fair. My third thought is this looks very like Yoshi's Story. And I think mostly it's because of the fruit. Like, I remember collecting fruit in that game.
You remember the watermelons in Yoshi's Story? Like with they're stripy? When you get to the second area in this game, there's also watermelons that look exactly like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. The fruit reminds me of that game. And then 4th, this just looks like fun. This looks like when like everybody had an iPod Touch in like middle school, and we'd all like download games on them, and everyone would be playing like there'd always be like the arcade, and like it was like they were all free to play, and you'd just have a bunch of games on your like music iPad, like touch for music and games and shit. And like this reminds me, like it's almost kind of like nostalgic for that era of like when gaming on like your phone or like a touchscreen was kind of first like a big deal, and there was just millions of little arcade games like this.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about this is I kind of have that same feeling. Like by no means am I going to continue to play this all the time, but like it is more fun than you think. And what I love about it is that it's like playing one of those fun mobile games, but because it's through Netflix, there's no ads. And because it's like so it's like freemium, right? Like part of the reason those games suck so bad is even if they have like a mechanic that's actually kind of fun to mess around with, you have to sit through so many ads and wait for the gems and all this stuff. But this is you can just play this as if it's like on your NES or something over and over in like a Tetris round or something. So it's perfect in that way. But yeah, it's fun for what it is. I would recommend checking it out if you want to kill some time. You could do a lot worse on your phone than Poinpy.
You could do a lot less. You could sit there and do nothing. So yeah, you could. That's maybe worse than playing Poinpy.
That's right. And the good thing about this game too is I think you can get to the end. I think there actually is an end, like a top. I don't think it's just like an endless thing. And for me, that's good motivation because I don't love like high score stuff. But if there's a finale, maybe one day I can get there and like add it to my list. Games I've beat, so that's fun. I don't think I'll ever beat Poinpy though, to be honest. But we'll see. Anyways, I guess that brings us to listener mail for the day because we are changing the order of the show. So I'll pass that one over to you to read our lovely question for today.
Yeah, so this is a fun one. It's also hilarious. So this like also can back to middle school nostalgia of playing little arcade games. There is the middle school nostalgia of like whatever little like I don't know where this like who invented this, but everybody knows this game and has played it. And it's like the Fuck, Marry, Kill game, which sounds horrible if you don't know what it is. But if you do know what it is, you get 3 things and you have to assign them to those categories. So like one of the 3 you have to fuck, one of the 3 you have to marry, and one of the 3 you have to kill. And in middle school it would often be like 3 boys in our class, and it would just be like a hilarious thing that 12-year-olds would do that like obviously like would never come to anything. But we have today 3 things that we have to group into those categories that are like selling points of video games. So the first one is being addictive as a selling point, being immersive as a selling point, and then being over a certain amount of hours as a selling point.
Like
Um,
playtime length.
yeah,
Yeah.
playtime length, and where we would slot those in through this ridiculous three
These
set
ridiculous
structure.
metrics. Okay. This is a fun one for sure.
hmm
Do you want to go first or second?
I'll go first because I immediately did this. I did this in about
Okay.
30 seconds and was like, "Yep, I know
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
want to do." So I would kill over X amount of hours because I just don't ever really see that as a positive. I often find at best it's stressful. At worst, it's a turnoff because I don't have 200 hours to put in every single game. And I also think that, like, sometimes that's a shorthand for like, we put a bunch of bloat, and like the best parts of the game are, comprised of 30 hours, but you have to play this game for 200 to
Mhm.
finish it. And it becomes a slog. And like some games justify the length. Like, I love Persona. I played 140 hours of Elden
Yeah.
Ring, and like
Divinity.
Divinity, it's not like I never play long games, but I just think that like the game should be the length it
Yeah. There's
needs
only
to
so
be
many
to
games
serve
that
the
justify
content.
that length.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think it's like a trap that people fall into of like, oh, what value? Because it costs like X amount of money per dollar. And so like, but it can be a little bit of a trap. So I would kill that and just, the game should be as long as it needs to be, not on a
Imagine if For
metric.
Your Eyes was like 20 hours long. You had to
Well,
sit there
that's
and
the
blink at
thing,
your phone
right?
for 20 hours instead of
Oh
an
my
hour
god,
and
first
20
of all, my
minutes.
eyes would have fallen out of my skull because my eyes felt like shit after that game of straining to keep them open. And second of all, like I think a lot of experiences end up being more meaningful because they were fleeting. Like that's kind of the point. So anyway, that's what I would do. I would fuck addictive as a selling point because I just think that's kind of the point of what an addictive game is, right? Like
Sure.
it's just, if a game is addictive, it is supposed to be like meaningful but not deep. And so like, you have fun with it for a small portion of time and then
And then
you
it's
don't think
gone.
about it afterwards.
Sure.
Exactly. And then I would marry immersive games because that to me is actually a good aspect and something that does sell me on games.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like to be immersed in the story and a world, and if I'm gonna marry something, I'd like, there to be some depth in that relationship.
100%. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to go. So for mine, I've interpreted it a little different, but maybe that's good for conversation.
Mhm,
So for my list, I agree. I'm going to marry immersive as well. I think
mhm.
out of all of them, like I think as a marketing term, I find it cheesy because like, what does it mean if a game is immersive? Like, I don't know if I've ever sat down and been like, whoa, wait, 8 hours have passed. Like, what's happened? Like people use that as like an analogy for like you sit into your couch and you don't realize the day's flown by, and I get it. But like, I haven't actually lost time for like 8 hours and not known what was going on. Like, games aren't actually that immersive to the point where you like lose reality. And I think sometimes that's what they're trying to get across when they say immersive. But either way, I still think it's a good thing. So I'll take that.
Have you heard the word verisimilitude?
No, but I love it. I love that
So
word.
that to me is how I define immersive, which I think is why I see it as a very positive quality. So verisimilitude is a quality and like usually used to describe like some kind of media, like a book or a game. And it is like the quality or like appearance of being like real or like true. And so I would use that to describe a game where like or a book of like where like it's obviously a fictional world I'm in and it's not like I'm like, like
You're not
unaware
actually
of being
there.
in the
Yeah.
real world and I'm not actually there and like yeah I didn't all stop playing and all of a sudden it's Sunday because I forgot to eat and like
Yeah, that's what I'm
drink,
talking
but
about.
when you're in that world like it's cohesive and all the things make sense and it has its own rules that everything abides by and it feels like it has an internal logic that makes it like a,
Mhm.
a world that could exist. And so I think that's what I feel like when we
Yeah,
say immersive, like,
fair enough.
you know,
I think you're
yeah.
right. I'm thinking it from the perspective of how they're trying to use it as a marketing term because that was the question.
Yeah,
I think they're talking
that's
about that.
fair.
I don't
That's
think they're
fair.
talking about
That's fair.
verisimilitude. when they're marketing it.
That's fair. I don't think, yeah, like
However,
Call of Duty isn't gonna sell me because like, oh, it's like
yeah.
you're really in a war. Like, oh God,
I
no,
hope it
stop.
doesn't. You know what though?
I hope not.
You made my day by teaching me this word. I love it. Okay,
That's
so
a
back
great
to the
word.
list. Back to the list.
Hmm.
Somewhat controversially, I'm gonna actually fuck over 100 hours, and I don't think
That is such a good out of context
you're gonna
quote.
pull that one out of the podcast.
Yeah, I just clipped
Um,
that.
put that on YouTube Shorts. We'll get so many hits. Because I think as a marketing term, it's like I, I don't know. Like I don't think most games need to be that long. I think you could shave like 20% to 40% of the length off of most games that come out, and they'd be better for it. But like, I think this is more about me just hating addictive as a marketing term. I hate it. I just want to
That's
talk
fair.
about that.
That's often how this game starts is like you don't pick them oh it's kind of like process of elimination. It's like which do I hate the absolute most? Okay, I'm gonna kill that one and then I'll assign
Exactly.
the
That's
others.
how it's gonna go. Like because
Yeah.
I just want to talk about how much
Yeah.
I hate addictive as a marketing term because you see it all the time and it's often on like mobile ads. And this is what like I guess I'm thinking about it because I've been on like Poinpy and all this stuff. Is because you'll see in the review it's like, oh, addictive gameplay. Like first of all, what does that mean? Second of all, like why is it a good thing if you get addicted to something? And like also it reinforces this argument that like people that don't understand games are like, oh, video game addiction is this huge thing, and like I'm sure there are people that are addicted to games. You can be addicted to anything if you form a habit. But it's like
Hmm.
this like red herring thing that people are all, moral panicking about. And then there's like these games that are marketing themselves as addicting, as like good quality. And then I just don't know. I don't know. And then you hear people like, oh yeah, I'm so addicted to this game. And I just feel like that's not good, man. I don't know.
Hmm.
Like that's just how I take it. I've been addicted to like I binged Persona for like a whole weekend, for example. Like I think that can be like an enjoyable experience, but in general, I don't like it is like a positive like notch in the positive column for being addictive. Like I don't think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I kind of like interpret it more like just as the terms of like what they are in general,
Mm-hmm,
whereas you
mm-hmm.
looked at it very much in the context of marketing. And like, if
Yeah,
you, to me, like addictive is just like the really shitty version of immersive. Like, you know,
budget
that's
immersive.
well, like it's just like the evil version because like what it screams to me is like we're gonna make you pay a bunch of microtransactions is what
Mm-hmm.
that screams to me in a marketing campaign. Like if the game just wants you to play a lot about it, then why not use the term immersive if you're gonna have that
Well,
like
because
you know you're so committed and you're gonna play your
mm-hmm.
whole weekend away because you're so immersed in it. But if you use the term addictive, I'm like, oh, I have to get my wallet out. Got it.
Yeah,
Like,
but
sure.
could you be immersive? Like, what if you got? I wouldn't say like Super Smash Bros is immersive, but I would say you
Mhm.
could get it. It could be addictive, like a one more match, like
I guess
within
that's
the
fair.
context of different kinds of games.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I just think, yeah, addictive has that horrible
Mm-hmm.
connotation of like it's scammy, right? Like it seems a
Yeah,
little bit like it's got a nefarious undertone. Like I picture like Raid Shadow Legends and like a gotcha game whenever
yeah, Genshin Impact.
that term comes up.
Yeah,
Yeah. And like it's not to say I've never been like really into a game and like, felt that like I just want to binge it. Like
no,
I guess
we've
that's an
all had that
addictive quality.
experience.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you're right that it is a weird thing to market because like addiction by
Yeah,
definition is not
it's a weird thing.
healthy.
But like, if you put that in the marketing, that means they must have feedback that people out there are like looking for games that are described as addictive. Like, are you going through like,
Mhm.
what am I gonna get into next? Like, it's so weird. I don't know.
Yeah. And that tends to be paired up with practices of like giving you like false reasons to keep playing, which usually tends to be battle passes
Mm-hmm,
and like
mm-hmm.
unlocking new characters and spend money to, get all this extra content. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like aligned with
Yeah.
mobile, and that's like a lot of mobile stuff and like live service stuff, like
Mhm.
like WoW and like etc. games. I don't know. It's
Mhm.
interesting though, and even like immersive is like a weird. Like to me, that's not a nefarious one, but it's just like, what does it really mean? Like we just talked about it now. It means something different to both of us. I'm sure if you go to
Yeah.
GameStop right now, and poll everyone in the store, they're going to say something variable. But it's just worse. It's ambiguous. I don't think it's bad if a game's immersive. the other two can be like
Mhm.
detrimental somehow.
Mhm.
Fun to talk about.
Yeah.
All
What
right,
an
everybody.
interesting question.
Yeah, this is good. Let's get to this trailer, shall we? Now, this is the part where we're gonna do something new, everybody. Like we mentioned at the top, we're gonna watch the trailer for Final Fantasy 16 that was the state of play from a couple of days ago. So let's get it started here. For anyone that doesn't want to watch along, this is going to be better definitely for the video listeners. But for those of you on
Mhm.
audio that are going to move on to the next podcast, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. And for everyone else, let's get this trailer started. Let's hope it's the right volume. Missy, you can hear it okay?
Mhm.
We're doing it
Yeah,
live,
this is
everybody.
great.
First time for
Hello everyone, this is Naoki Yoshida, producer of Final Fantasy XVI, and welcome to the
subtitles on
State
the show.
of Play.
Mhm.
Today, I'm here to talk a little bit about the story, world, and combat system of
Now,
Final
how excited are you for
16,
Final Fantasy
as
16?
well as reveal all new information
Basically
regarding
zero.
the
Like,
game's
I think they're
plot,
cool games. They're
RPG
just not
elements, and
something that
support
I've ever
systems.
gotten into.
Gotcha.
We'll be
I know
talking
you are
with
excited
I'm quite
about
excited
Final
for this
Fantasy.
one.
never before seen gameplay
And
footage
for those that haven't
running
heard us
on the
talk about it
PlayStation
before,
5.
just because I don't
I
really
hope you'll stay
I don't
with
know.
us until the end of the show and enjoy
This game
everything
apparently
we
has
have
like
in
very
store.
Devil May Cry-esque
With that,
combat,
let's get
and like the
started.
same kind of design. The same designer, I think, actually worked on the combat, so that makes me even more excited too, because that's something I always wanted to try, but haven't yet had
You
a
all know
chance.
the target.
Mhm.
Shiva's dominant. And only the dominant.
What is it with Final
Focus,
Masters? Always
Wyvern.
like weird symbols on their face.
They love
Like, are
face
those
tattoos.
tattoos?
Yeah.
Are they tattoos, or
They
are they
love
like
tattoos.
branded kind?
Well, it's kind of both, I
Okay.
guess.
I just mean, like, did the person go out and get that tattooed,
No,
or
that's
were
a
they
good
like
question.
born with it as like a secret
No.
symbol?
I mean, I think they get them.
Okay. I think, yeah, Final Fantasy is pretty metal. I got it.
I don't know if all these guys have that, but that's a pretty metal jacket.
Allow me to welcome you to the world of Final Fantasy XVI.
It is gorgeous. Like, these games are
Final
always
Fantasy
beautiful.
16 is the latest installment in the Final Fantasy series,
Yeah.
a storied franchise with 35 years of history.
All the like little
Yet while
sparks
this is
that
the
come off the
16th
attacks
mainline
just look
title
so
in the
cool.
series, there's absolutely
Their
no
particle
need to
effects
have
engine
played
is
any of the
outrageous.
previous games before jumping in. With a fusion of real-time action and RPG features, Final Fantasy 16
Wonder what
has been
RPG
developed
features
as
are.
the first true action RPG
Probably
of
like
the
leveling
series.
up your character and like gear
There's a
and
skill
stuff.
tree.
Using the power of the
Yeah.
PlayStation 5 to its fullest, the game delivers an
God,
expansive,
that looks
thrilling
awesome.
gameplay experience which we liken to a high-speed roller coaster ride.
Like, this is the kind of game like I'm kind of interested to play, like, even just for the spectacle of it. Like, it looks so badass, and the creature design's always cool. Like,
Yeah. I think for you, it would come down to how compelled you end up being in the world and story. Because I don't think for as cool as it's the kind of combat that you'll love. I don't know. There's always room for exceptions, of course.
I think I almost like want to hang out with someone. Well, my ideal is like someone I know is playing Final Fantasy, and I hang out while they play it, but like
Neat.
play my own game. Yeah,
It's
like,
neat.
I want to like sit and just like, you know, play something on my Switch while I watch someone else play Final Fantasy. Because
Look
like
at
I
that
want to
guy.
see all the spectacle, but like
was
I
cool as
don't
hell.
want to do. That guy was cool as hell. Like I want to see that boss fight, but I don't want to play the like, you know, like 30 hours to get there.
Mhm.
The protagonist of our story is Clive Rosfield.
I think that's my biggest fear of this game so far is like it's just gonna. I know it's gonna be huge. Like that's the problem.
Clive, Shield of the Grand Duchy of Rosaria. As
And I'm
it
fine to
unfolds
just
across
play the
three
main story and
distinct
kind of do
periods
the
in
side
our
stuff
hero's
as I
life,
want, but I just
his
hope it's
teens,
not like
20s, and 30s.
mandatory enough to where I have to waste like 200,000 hours, you know? I love the subtitle there. Oh,
Well,
Yeah,
the story
ugh.
begins with Clive in his 20s. A fully playable flashback will allow you to experience the pivotal events that shaped his past and
Ooh, a
present.
bunch of rocks falling on him.
oh.
I love the
And
outfits
thus does
too.
the
Like I just
film
love the
on
like
this newest
edgy
Final Fantasy
design that
adventure.
Final Fantasy's got.
It's like everyone dresses like medieval, like emo rockers, and no one has a problem with it. No one says anything. They're just like, yeah, you look fucking cool, dude.
Yeah. I will say, like, this setting is the most interesting to me, because, like, some of them are a bit more, like, futuristic, but I do dig this, like, old school castling one.
Well, Final Fantasy is like it's kind of like Resident Evil, where like they had the action horror split. Like Final Fantasy really has like a medieval futuristic split.
But this trailer is very like more medieval and like you know, phoenixes and creatures and monsters and not as much tech, and that appeals to me a lot more.
Yeah, there's definitely like a lot more of the modern ones have been more tech focused. Like 15, I think, is like you got the cars and all that stuff.
Yeah, like I'd rather fight a big hell demon than fight like evil organization who's like, you know, taking all the resources. Like, I would say maybe they're more of a bad guy than evil demon, but evil demon's cooler.
Yeah.
The world map can be opened at any time.
It doesn't look like there's a bunch of shit on
access
there.
to all manner of locations across Valisthea.
It's so pretty
Here,
though.
players
Oh my
will meet
god.
new friends, encounter formidable foes, and uncover great and wondrous mysteries.
Yeah, I'm pretty like. I would be surprised if this wasn't one of the most beautiful games on the system to date. I think, just because it's been developed for so long, like it's mid-life cycle-ish of the console now. You know, like expectations are pretty high for that. Just like Elden Ring or God of War 2. And,
Yeah, the environments are incredible. Like, this is interesting. If this wasn't a Final Fantasy game, I feel like I would be like really hyped about this trailer. So like, it's weird that I think it's just because it's such a big series, and I know I'm not a Final Fantasy fan, that I've like kind of like written it off. Like, oh, it's another Final Fantasy game. I don't play those. But looking at this trailer without having any kind of bias about the series, like, I want to play this game. This looks amazing.
like the connotation of yeah.
Next, I'd like to talk about the combat of Final Fantasy XVI.
It really is the combat that
All the battles
I
in
get
the
a little
game
lost.
take place in real time and are not turn-based. As Clive progresses through the story, he will learn a wide array of exciting abilities.
To me,
and
what I love about the
abilities
combat
that
is
he encounters.
like this is like my favorite style of combat. I think after playing like 7 remake and whatnot, and just because like the action's a little less technical in terms of like the execution, but then you have the added elements of like, okay, where am I going to use my elemental moves and my healing and like my RPG-esque abilities, and like break my opponent with their weaknesses and stuff like that. And that stuff combines so nicely to me.
Yeah, I totally understand the appeal. I just have trouble like enjoying it for like the span of an entire game, which is weird because I'd almost rather like the extremes. I'd rather like the more like precision-based combat, or like just a full-on turn-based.
Yeah.
Where I'm
fair enough.
strategizing. Like, it's when they're blended that I get lost a little bit.
Because there's like gauges at the top. You can see it's all building up, and you're like switching characters. And
Yeah.
my God, look at that! Look at that spear attack. You know?
I mean, it's so cool. That's why I want to watch you. I gotta
Yeah.
come watch you play it. Like, it's so cool to watch.
That was look at that slashing in here. Sorry to audio listeners who stuck around to watch the trailer.
Yeah, like they're just showing like
It's just
like a
mesmerizing. I don't know
like
if
a
it's described what's
Rocky
happening.
montage of like the coolest fights you've ever seen. Like, this is the final episode of like every anime.
Yeah.
Just in a montage.
It's like cutscenes from different animes in like the last fight. You know what else I really like about this too is like the UI is so minimal. I like the big health part at the top because it's very vital information, and then the rest of like your equipment and your items at the bottom, they're a lot more like out of the way, so you can enjoy like the visual.
Yeah, it is
beauty.
a very
Clive
visual
vehicles
experience.
Have unique characteristics depending on the icon
Here's
they
the
are
RPG
derived from.
elements.
Yeah.
Players
You've
can
got
use
some
ability
skill
points
wheels.
collected by defeating enemies to unlock more abilities or upgrade existing ones.
This guy's been saving way too
Can't
many
decide
points. Look
which
how many things he's
iconic
unlocked.
ability
Yeah,
to unlock or
man.
Upgrade? No problem.
Either that or you
Let
just
the
put in some
game
point
choose
sheet,
for
you
you.
know? I think this is the other thing too, is like these games always have like a million different abilities you can use, and I find that overwhelming. So like even when I have like 30, I'm like, I'm gonna use these 2 and nothing else.
What about like Divinity though?
But that's turn-based, so it's different. Like I will use them in a turn-based game, but I won't use them in an action game. Like, and maybe that's my fault. Maybe the combat's boring because I don't use them all, but I just like.
That might be it. I mean, it does like. I mean, who knows? Depends on the
Is the
game.
ring of timely focus and the ring of timely strikes.
I do like this ring that lets you kind of like do some cool
Allows you
dodges.
to unleash a wide array of techniques.
as well as shifting into a window
So yes, I'm overwhelmed.
whenever Clive is about to
And I
be
have
hit
a
by an attack,
technique.
giving them a little extra time to hit R1 and evade.
I do like the evasion ring though. Like that's
Alternatively,
cool.
players could equip an accessory that fully automates evasion. As I said before, I really encourage everyone to discover the combination.
See,
that
that's what I
works
don't
best for
think
them.
is cool. It's like locking that behind an accessory.
Yeah, that
That's an
just seems like that
accessibility
should be a
feature.
mode.
That's an
Yeah.
accessibility feature. You shouldn't have to waste your
Unless-
slot.
Yeah.
And for those who want to concentrate on
agree.
the story, don't forget to choose Story Focus Mode before starting a new game. In this mode, timely accessories are automatically equipped from the start, allowing players to immerse themselves in the narrative experience without having to worry too much
That one's
with
for
the
mom.
action.
She would never play this. But I would love to watch that.
Let us know in the comments below if you want us to stream our mom doing a Let's Play of Final Fantasy 16 on story mode.
Clive will
Oh
meet
my
many characters
God.
along his journey who will join him
I
as
would-
friends and allies.
I want to
Look
watch
at the Moogle,
that so
Kate.
bad.
There's a Moogle.
Yeah, it's Kappa. Capo, so what do they always say? Capo?
Mont Blanc. Or yeah, Koopa. Koopa.
And it keeps the black from our lungs.
But how do you survive without magic?
Sidolphus, who becomes a mentor to Clive. Jill, a friend from Clive's youth.
It really is.
Such encounters and reunions will set Clive on a path of great personal growth.
It is.
Clive.
I hope the
Some of
in
these
the character
companions
stories
even
are
accompany Clive on his
as interesting as
adventures,
like the overarching like
alongside
world
him,
narrative. I
finding
find that
ways to
sometimes
talk
Final
about
Fantasy is
the
like
way.
really strong with the overarching
That
narrative,
said,
but then the
players will
the
only
character
focus
relations are
on
kind of like
controlling Clive.
the
Party members are
What about
fully
the
AI-driven,
boy bands
providing
in their
support
Yeah,
car?
see, I don't know if I love the
constantly
boy bands.
adapting and responding to his
a couple of them got along well, but like I saw how they had relationships with the main character, but then amongst each other it felt very much like I'm the tough guy and I'm the quirky one, and we're gonna interact like that every time.
Right.
Whereas other games like Final Fantasy VII Remake was like phenomenal, and the characters felt like a real cohesive unit. So
Right. So it can be a little hit or miss.
right, but this game is also written. I think they have the writers from the 14, right, the MMO, and apparently that's like one of the best stories in Final Fantasy. So I hope that carries over.
Oh, and we cannot forget Torgal.
You get a pet dog. Oh, that's big
A
points.
smart, strong, and fiercely loyal hound, Torgal is always by Clive's side and willing to stand by him in the face of whatever cruel fate may befall them. Torgal will act of his own accord, but players can also give him direct commands.
But can you pet him? That's the
Just
big question.
Don't forget to
Oh.
give this good boy some treats every now and then.
Don't forget
Oh.
to give this good boy some treats.
Don't starve your dog, please.
Don't fret about Karen. I've taken care of her fee.
All of it.
She's the best healer this side of the belt.
Well, I did not expect his voice
Nothing
to be
worry
that deep.
about.
Right?
Go. Have a look around. I'll be in my solar.
After progressing somewhat through the game, Clive will gain access to Cid's hideaway.
Oh, that was Sid.
Isn't he a character that's been in a lot of Final Fantasy games?
There's always
Hidden
a Sid in,
hideaway,
in every
Clive
Final
will
Fantasy,
find
but
a
he's
shop
he's
where he can
always a
purchase
different
new
guy.
weapons, armor, and
Usually he's
consumables
like a
such as
shopkeeper,
potions.
like the airship pilot and stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say I know him from
Cannot find a better
the
price.
Disney Final Fantasy game, Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah,
highly
yeah.
He's like a
skilled
shopkeeper
blacksmith
there.
who Works
Yeah.
the hideaway's forge. Bring in materials to craft new gear.
I think there might
or
be one
upgrade
where he's a
existing
party member, but I
items.
could be wrong on that.
After upgrading your equipment or unlocking new abilities, try accessing the Arete Stone.
Rosetta Stone?
Yeah, just this game can actually teach you German or like another language if you'd
I was
like.
thinking like Moogle, but
They are
let's go with
free to
German.
refine
Yeah,
and
Moogle.
craft combos of their very own.
All Mughals speak German. Little
Once
known
you're
fact.
confident in your skills, try your hand at arcade
Here it's
mode
training
and see how
time,
your
Kate.
scores stack up against players from around the world.
Oh, you can like online fight?
It's arcade mode. It's like see who can
The Hideaway
score
is
the
home
most
to a lot
points.
of other features as well.
I guess.
Yeah, and you got your side quests.
I just hope this game
Not
doesn't
only will
bog you down
players
with like
discover
a
a
ton
variety
of
of side
crafting and like
quests
picking
here,
up
but they
like
can
a
also
shitload of
view
different materials on the
quests
grass as you're
all
running
around
by. Like I want to
Valisthea.
be free to
Right.
explore and engage with the quest and not have to spend all this time like making leather armor and then making it into the next one. And you know, I don't like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
You want it to be a little bit more streamlined than some of these games tend to be, while still having options to do like side quests or like
Alright,
some
Clive.
content.
Still busy saving the world?
She's got some
Mid.
long hair.
She does.
When
And
did
look
you
at
get
his hair.
back?
He's got so much mousse in there.
He
It
does. It must be rock hard.
doesn't look like it. But yeah. I don't think this game will be like that, to be honest, though, just because it's like from.
Oh,
I feel like Square is more too Japanese for that. I think it's more like the Western open worlds that are more
Yeah.
Skyrim and more like that.
And I feel like it has like it's all like that kind of stuff is all optional too. Like you can go to like the Moogle like
To gain
quest
information
board, but
on
like you don't
monsters,
have to do that if
fearsome
you don't
foes
want
lurking
to.
About the realm in desperate need of slaying. The Moogle will be your guide.
It's a nice map.
It is a nice
I
map.
would say.
I like the music too. It's just nice. Like, I really think the creature design is like the biggest standout to me in this
Mhm.
game.
There's also Loresman Harpocrates, who will unlock Valisthea's secrets as Clive recounts tales of his adventures.
I love when they bring
Aw,
back the
it's-
pixel art,
It looks so good.
and they have the blue menu as well. Like that is awesome.
Yeah. Dude, we thought the other guy's voice was deep.
the tomes?
Oh no, it's not that deep.
Oh, it's not bad. I will not be spending any time
Here
with
for
this
another
guy
of my
until you
lunch?
went reading the tomes.
You wanna
Scholar
go
and
read bedtime
strategist
stories
with
who
that
is more than
guy?
happy to
No.
explain to Clive the current state of the realm and provide information on key players.
What is
There
this
are
like?
all
The,
kinds of interactions and features in the Hideaway to help players get even more enjoyment out of their time with Final Fantasy
See,
XVI.
this is where it feels like the bogged down stuff is
Yeah.
maybe gonna
maybe the hideaway is
happen.
just
But
a place to
again,
avoid.
yeah, but again, if it's optional.
Look at that ice area. That is wicked. Like the rain.
Mhm.
On his travels, Clive will encounter a wide array of fearsome foes.
That was a cool transition.
Night of Blinding Dawn.
That's a badass name.
That guy looks like he's from Monster Hunter.
Yeah, he does. Cut the tail off, Clive. Get a new hat.
Oh, nice dodge.
Midnight Raven.
That's a Mega Man X enemy.
That's a band, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, he's only level 12. He can't be that hard.
What? I don't think you're allowed to call yourself Midnight Raven if you're only level
Yeah,
12.
come on.
Like you gotta earn that.
Yeah, you can't just go around calling
Factions
yourself
the
Midnight
dominance
Raven.
who wield the power of the icons.
This guy's just called Hugo.
He's-
See, he
he's
hasn't
got the power
earned a cool
icon.
title yet.
Yeah, yeah, look at his icon.
What does that mean?
It's just summon and look at his arms.
This game is just like pure anime drugs in like the best way possible. Like, it's so over the top and, like,
surrounding lands
exaggerated, but it's awesome.
They so clearly want to indicate like the element of
mysterious
everything.
constructs of the fallen.
Yeah,
A civilization shrouded in mystery.
it's control node.
That's more of a level 12 name to me.
Mm-hmm.
This is cool. Man, there must be a lot of bosses in this game because they're just flying through these at like a very rapid rate and showing. They show us like
Right?
5 or
Like-
6 bosses now.
This game must be packed with things. Like, I know it's a state of play, so like we get a deeper dive, but I'm surprised by the amount of content they've just like thrown in without any like fanfare to talk about it. Just like watch like the compilation of best fights in the game. But they can't be the best fights in the game because you don't want to spoil
Don't
those.
forget the icons themselves.
This is what I want to see.
Experience unparalleled real-time action combat as Clive takes command of the iconic might coursing through his veins and shatters his very limits. The shining point of Final Fantasy XVI, however, has to be the breathtaking icon versus icon battles.
I wonder
These
how
are,
much
like,
of
the
these
big,
are like
big
cinematic
bosses.
versus mechanical.
I imagine they go probably through like sections where
Yeah.
you do like this for a little while and then you have like a cinematic part where they like come together and fight a bit and then you back out and like do this again.
Real time, allowing players to control their
Oh, they
very
really
own
want to
icon with their
focus on
own
this like
hands.
real time element.
Yeah. They're probably careful about it because a lot of people will just like Final Fantasy, that must be turn-based, and then they'll get this and be like, what is
These battles
this?
differ depending on the icon encountered, and every showdown is unique, right down to gameplay. Players will experience everything from a 3D scrolling shooter to a heavyweight wrestling match with devastating attacks that encompass the entire battlefield.
So they have different mechanics in these battles.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That is really interesting.
These massive scale boss battles are entirely seamless, and I can promise you heart-stopping, controller-gripping excitement. I can't wait for you to get your hands on the game for yourself.
This game actually like. Am I interested in a Final Fantasy game? Maybe. The answer's not no.
There's worse ones to start off with, I think.
Well, that's the thing. I think with this kind of series, like, dude, this is the 15th one. Like, you cannot stress
16,
about like
16.
what you've missed. 16, yeah. And this is
Not
16 in like
including
numbered
extended
order.
ones, too.
Yeah, exactly. This is just purely in the ones that are actually numbered.
It's like Panzer Dragoon or whatever.
Yeah. It's like Moltres versus Articuno.
Phoenix versus Bahamut, actually. It's like Star Fox.
I feel like this game, like, I might actually really enjoy it if I were to just, like, mainline it. I think I would, like, lose myself in it and get, like, bored if I did, like, all the side quests and stuff.
Yeah.
But to just mainline and kind of do these, like, cinematic boss battles and, like, beat the game in a relatively decent time.
That guy's wicked. He has
This
no
looks like
bottom half of
Tekken
his
now.
body.
Dude, you need that.
He's too powerful. He's transcended, like, the second half of his body. He doesn't need it. That
When you're
looks
so
awesome,
powerful
too.
that legs just wait. Yeah, this is like
This is
like a God of War, like climbing the Colossus kind of.
It reminds me of
shit.
Sonic. Like you're running on the rails.
Sonic,
On the rails,
yeah.
running up a ramp. It looks like a not insignificant amount of time that you're doing these things for, you know?
Well, this is almost like drawing me in. Like, I like when games kind of like keep switching it up.
It's like Ratchet and Clank when you do the Clank levels and then you have the Spider Bot levels. The scale is just massive too. Like, look at how big this thing is that you're fighting. It's like that classic God of War feeling on the PS2 when you just
Yeah.
those insanely huge titans.
I'm shocked by just how much they're showing us too. Like, what is left in the game to do outside of all of this?
Well, we're gonna end
Oh,
up
that was a
killing
lot of
it.
damage.
Yeah.
So everyone, what did you think? Thank you for taking the time to join us
You know
today.
what I think is I
Final
want that
Fantasy
jacket.
16 will be available
Mm-hmm.
worldwide
Dude, looks like
on
he could be in
June
Final Fantasy.
22nd. And there's still
June
plenty
22nd.
that we've
Ooh.
left to reveal.
That's the day we're
Choice
seeing
Battle
update.
Volbeat.
content,
Oh my
side
God.
content,
No, that's
in-game
July
content,
22nd.
and
I want to see
you're right,
Volbeat.
you're right.
we hope to bring
So you
more
could try to
of
beat the
these
game in a
aspects of the
month
game
before it's
in
Volbeat
the near future.
time.
Yeah.
Also, I'm truly excited to finally be able to reveal that Final Fantasy XVI's main theme was written and performed by one of Japan's greatest recording artists, Kenshi Yonezu. We've still got a lot more in store for you in the coming weeks, and I hope you'll all pre-order
lot
the game
more in
and
store in
join
the
us
coming
in
weeks.
Valencia on release day. This has been
I don't know if I
Naoki
want to
Yoshida,
see more.
producer.
Is
Well, that was
you
great.
know?
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna. I don't think I'm gonna watch anything else on this game now. Like even before we started recording, I was saying to you that I don't think I want to see. I don't even think I needed to see this to be excited to play this. But honestly, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what more I need to see. Like I can't wait to play this game.
Yeah, like I needed to see this. I wasn't interested, and I genuinely think I am interested now. Like maybe not like day one playing this, but like
Mhm.
if you really like it and recommend it, and like I might eventually. Like, this is not something I'm gonna necessarily sleep on now after seeing this trailer. But I don't know if I want to see more because like
Yeah, yeah,
that was a lot. That was cool, but like I think you run the risk of just being kind of like oversaturated and like especially with a game that's really like spectacle focused. Like if I've seen, half an hour of like the spectacle of the gameplay, then, I've kind of like experienced it in a way and I'm less excited to actually play the game and see more.
yeah. And there's just nothing I want to know. Like I kind of have a feel of exactly how this is gonna go now. You're on the map, you're doing your
Mhm.
things, you got your skill tree, you got the combat, like these different gameplay styles. Anything beyond that, I feel like I just want it to be a surprise. And I don't know. I
Mhm.
don't think they'll show too much more than that. I think they'll just probably repackage the same information now, and it'll begin to be like a death loop situation as they mark
Mhm.
it over and over. But it looks great to me. I can't wait.
Mhm.
Folks, this brings us to the end of the podcast. Usually this is listener mail, but you already know we did that. So I guess there's nothing left to do than say thanks for listening. And I will see you next week because this has been Cloud Control, the gaming podcast. It's not just good, it's good enough. So see you on the next episode.